very well.
And
Kind of asymmetrical here.
what we have,
Maybe.
Sylvia, do I announce now? In a minute? What?
yes, if you're going to film, you should announce that you're filming.
Yeah,
We
so-
also have our own person that's doing videography, right?
So I just want to announce that I'm filming. Is that right, Sylvia? Okay, thank you.
And Sharon's also filming.
Yes.
Right,
And I want to ask a question.
sure.
Are we also live streaming or are we just recording?
I don't know the answer to that.
So we're filming live, but we're not, we haven't have advertised that people can sign in and look at what we're doing right now, right? So right now, we're filming it live. It'll go up on the website under the meeting materials so that people can review the meeting.
But if someone knew about the meeting happening, they would be able to see it streaming live now
I don't know where they would see that.
on YouTube.
No,
But
my
it's a
understanding is
possibility
that it's
that we
not being
can
live
explore.
streamed.
It is not live
No.
streamed.
Well, there's no link on the
There's no link
website to
on
that.
the website or anyplace else.
You raise a good point, and I think perhaps maybe at our December meeting, we can talk about all of this. I do have some comments about what circumstances under which we are required to be recorded and what circumstances we can refuse to be recorded. And I'll share that with you later. Thank you, Mary Pat. All right, let's go around and do our introductions. I'll start tonight. I'm Leslie Hammond. I'm the SWNI president.
Sylvia Bogert, Director for Southwest Neighborhood.
Ed Davis, Vice Chair of Multnomah.
Ron Gillian, Chair of Maplewood Neighborhood. David Martin, Transportation Chair.
Jackie Phillips, Homestead.
Pat, do you not want to be videotaped?
I do not.
I'm Debbie Hall from West Portland Park.
Gary Rundy, Land Use Chair. I also hail from West Portland
So,
Park.
Shannon Hiller-Webb, South Burlingame Riverhead.
Marie Tyvall, Hillsdale Neighborhood Association.
Sharon Keith, staff, Southwest Neighborhoods. Mary Pat.
Mary Pat Pencil.
So if I have her head, is that a problem?
Mary
What does it
Ventura.
mean?
I'm here for George Vanis in
Sorry,
for Southwest.
I can put
can
your
film
face
anybody
to your name.
without permission.
Oh,
Because
okay,
George has
thank
been
you.
talking
I'm
about
just
you, but I couldn't think of who
Courteous,
you were.
telling her
Oh,
that she's
thank you.
on video.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Bruce Ketzer, Ash Creek Neighborhood.
Glenn Michon, South Portland.
Murphy Terrell Watershed Committee.
John Gibbons, First Vice President, Markham Neighborhood.
I'm introducing some of the different vice presidents.
And we have a guest tonight.
Sam Pearson.
All right. I think the first thing we should do is approve our agenda, which is in front of you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second to approve the agenda?
Second.
Okay.
Jackie on the
Ron.
Ron on the
Yeah,
second.
Ron and John. And a third. Jackie. All right. All in favor of the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay,
One abstention.
Mary.
one abstention.
Thank you.
All right, I've already done the introduction, so now the next thing on the agenda is minutes. I think you'll see, I think there are 14 pages of minutes. They're very thorough. They were a product of looking at the video several times and have gone through several different reviews by different individuals. I'm assuming all of you have taken a look at them, but if you haven't, please take a look at them before I call for their approval or correction. All right. All in favor of approving opposed to the rest of the provisions that came out of the code committee. From a practical point of view, Commissioner Udaly had no votes. The only vote that was voted for her code revision was herself. So there were 4 commissioners that were opposed to it. So in order to address that, what they decided to do was have this meeting on the 14th where the report that the Civic Life had written was available to people. But what Commissioner Udaly did is she wrote a different resolution. And you have a copy of that, I believe, in your materials. It's on page, it's on the very back on page,
No,
nope, I take
no,
that.
it's,
Sylvia,
15,
tell us.
15 through 19.
15.
15 through 19.
Right.
What does that mean? That means she decided to ask the rest of the council to allow her to pull a multi-bureau work group together whose purpose is to have those bureaus work together for a common notification system because all of them work a little differently. And they are supposed to come up with a process of cross-reference responsibilities for public engagement. Now, those of us who got that motion, which was a week before, I think it was on the Friday before the Thursday meeting, didn't really know what that meant. So many of us testified at the hearing saying that this idea of a multi-bureau work group was a good idea in terms of developing some general process by notifying all kinds of different groups across the city. We didn't understand what the cross-reference responsibilities for public engagement would be. So we put in many suggestions with in between meetings, so I couldn't really consult with all of you, but I joined together with another group of people and put a letter before City Council with 9 different things that we said they should consider in modifying that. And one of them was the way that particular new resolution is set up. It doesn't have any public engagement for the first year. One of the things I spoke to was to say that I thought we should have public engagement right from the very first meeting. Even if it didn't make sense for us to comment on what the Bureau was considering until later, I suggested to them that we would want representation at those meetings so we know what's going on and we can figure out what's going on during the year. So when they do invite public engagement, we can actually know what has happened, what decisions they've made and why they haven't. That's just one of the many things. Commissioner Udaly said she intended to bring this resolution back for a vote in December. It's not clear that that can happen because of the numbers of suggested revisions to the new resolution for multi-group bureaus. So we'll just have to stay tuned on that. I don't have a date. I don't have anything. We are checking back with all the different offices to see if they're going to set up a date for that or whether it might be pushed into January. But the way it's supposed to work, they're supposed to have a year where the multi-bureau work group meets, and then at the end of that year, they're gonna make recommendations to the city council, and they're gonna have a year or 2 where they invite public testimony and work on revising the code on the basis of what came out of that multi-bureau work group. And we have, Jackie here's worked at one of the city bureaus. We have a lot of ways to find out, sort of how the bureaus are set up for notification, who they notify, and then what might be some good ideas that we could offer to make that process work better. So that's where the code is. It went down, so now they're have come up with another idea that they'd like to work on. Secondly, I have accepted Charlie Van Rossen's resignation as treasurer, but he's agreed to work with Sylvia and Nancy on accounting as we're going through a transition period. So he will review the monthly statements at the end of each month and look at them from his point of view and also from Nancy's work that's been done. So he's gonna help us with the transition. I don't have the name of a person to offer it yet as a treasurer, but I hope to do that by December, and it'll either be a specific person that we've interviewed and looks like they're interested in being a treasurer and can do the job, or we'll have an interim treasurer until we can find that person who's got the qualifications to work as a treasurer. I will say Charlie said this, because he's got the system in such good shape and very accountable, it would be easy for a non-accountant to come in and act as treasurer, because all that Nancy and Sylvia and the rest of us have to do is follow his procedures. And since he's reviewing it, since the executive board reviews the financial records background that would like to come in and take on that responsibility. So if you know of people, let me know. Okay. We're trying to ask all of you to present what motions or the thought that you're going to have a motion 6 days before the SWNI meeting, which is hard because we have so many, like transportation's on the Monday before, and sometimes equity is on the Monday before. But we'd like people to let us know the week before the SWNI meeting if you think you're gonna have a motion, so at least we can prepare, because it's a lot of work to do in a day or two right before the meeting. Get the motions, make changes, that kind of thing. So if you could do it earlier, we'd appreciate it, especially if it's not time sensitive. If it's philosophy, ideas, it's not time sensitive, getting it to us sooner would be better than later. And that sort of consistent was what we agreed in the facilitation. I've given you materials on what the city has said about recording of public meetings. They're at the very bottom on pages 31 and 32. But the gist of it is, on page 31, about the 4th paragraph, it says that if a neighborhood meeting is not a meeting of the whole board and doesn't have final decision-making power, anyone on that committee or subcommittee can say, I prefer we not be recorded, and then no recording can go on. So you can choose whether you want to be recorded or not if you're in a committee or a subcommittee. Because we make final decisions at the board level, people can come in and say that they want to record, and the city says that we must allow that, and that's why we do allow recording at the board members, because we make final decisions here. And those materials are in your materials tonight. And then last but not least.
I have my card up. So you recognize it? Yeah. So I want to thank you for bringing this to the board. I know that Rob Lennox, the chair of South Burlingame, brought it to your attention on October 3rd. And I appreciate that this was live streamed last month. I think that was a really great form of equity and transparency, and that it's being live streamed again tonight, I think, is a good move forward. I know that Jen Hawkins and others exclaimed at the executive committee that they found it beneficial to track on accurate meeting minutes. If it's 14 pages of meeting minutes, that's pretty phenomenal. But I would like to make a motion that SWNI live stream all SWNI board meetings to their YouTube channel beginning this month for all future meetings.
I'll second that, because then I wouldn't have to videotape.
All right, I just suggested that we might want to think about this until next month. Does anybody want to comment on whether we should act on the motion now or postpone it till next month?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You said it was live streamed last week?
Last month.
Last month?
It's not tonight, though.
And it's not being live streamed today?
Sharon said it wasn't.
I don't think it was live streamed.
It
We
is
weren't
being,
told it was
the way
live
we
streamed.
record it is a live stream. What Sylvia explained is there's no link on the website taking people to the live stream, like there was last month. Last month we advertised on the website, we had a link there, click, watch live.
We did not know that.
Well,
But this month there is no link, but it is being live streamed because that is the most simple way to record the meetings.
that's a term, that's a techie term.
Meaning it's just going straight to YouTube rather than going to an SD card where then I have to, after the meeting, go and, upload it and.
There's a lot to do afterwards.
Yeah.
That's much more
Don't
time consuming.
comment until I call on you. You've made your motion, we've had a second. We're now
prepared
taking comments. Jackie, are you finished?
I just would like more transparency. We didn't know it was being live streamed last month, so I would appreciate transparency and clarity.
David?
I didn't live stream it.
Wait,
I don't,
excuse
I
me.
can't.
You
Well,
can't?
she's looking at me, so I just wanna be clear, Jackie.
No,
I don't know how to live stream it. I can't do it from here.
Okay.
Yeah, SWNI did.
Be more
SWNI
transparent.
did.
It was on the board,
Sure.
webpage. It was a link of
Okay.
All right,
comments.
David?
I actually want to speak to this just.
Wait, I called on David. Did you want to speak, David?
No, I do not.
Okay,
That's
bring
fine.
that, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that it would have been really nice to know that, even if it was on the website. I think not being told that last month was not a good equity thing, was not a good inclusion thing, because none of us knew if we wanted to be on the screen or not on the screen as it happened. And as I went back and looked at it again in between the meetings, You know, there were a lot of people that their faces never showed, and then there were all the people on this one side of the room that showed the entire time. And so I just think that that not knowing that was very problematic.
All right, anybody, I want to make sure that every person who wants to speak to it gets to speak to it at least once before we go back and have other comments from people who've already spoken. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that people who are experiencing domestic violence or have experienced it in the past are very sensitive about photography, live streams, or any videos. So I think we, in the interest of equity, need to open up the opportunity for people to potentially object to videoing on the basis of an issue like domestic violence in their household.
David?
Yeah, I would like us to reconsider the camera angle. I don't want the camera pointed at me, and it is.
I would've put lipstick on had I known.
David, do you want it so it shows more of your head, or what? I've given up and worn a hat for a long time for that reason.
John?
How do I want to say this? It's no big deal to me because we've been live streaming and attempting to do participation by the internet in Markham for a couple of years now. As I understand live streaming, that's just broadcasting it out. The neighborhood participation back has been kind of problematic for Markham. So if we're is that right, Sharon, that live streaming just is, you put it up on YouTube and people can find it? They're not
Right. I have
commenting.
turned, for this meeting, I've turned commenting off. People can't chat, like, usually on a live stream, people could be watching and chatting with the person doing the live stream, but chatting has been, nobody chatted last month.
It's different because we're having a general meeting of the association membership, and this is a board of directors meeting where the people that are here are the only ones that participate. So with that exception, you know, I think we ought to make accommodations so that in the future people can see it live.
Okay, has everybody who wants to have their first comment, we're gonna do this, everybody gets to comment, let's say for 1 minute. I'm not gonna call in any repeat comments until I've gotten everybody who wanted to speak. All right, the next person, Shannon, did you have something in addition to the things that have been said here?
It just goes back to the document that you provided that says all board members, if you choose to be a board member in a position to make decisions, have to be allowed to be recorded.
That's for this meeting.
Yeah.
But it isn't for committees or subcommittees.
We're speaking about this meeting, so that's why
I
I'm
just
referencing
wanna
this meeting.
clarify.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, like,
Jackie?
I would kinda rather make the decision when more of us are here. We're like really down in our numbers so that we could have feedback and input from everyone and so that they're aware. And maybe in the meantime, go back and I'll call Sharon on Monday and she can explain to me how live stream works and what's different between a recording.
you could Google it.
I didn't call on you, Shannon. Are you asking for a motion to postpone it to next month?
Oh, can I do that at this
Yes.
time?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Okay, is there a second to
Sorry.
postpone it? Okay, it's Jackie to postpone until next month, David to, second it. All right, discussion on postponing, Catherine.
I sense there's some discomfort, and I think it's partly because of confusion, including me, on what exactly we're being asked. And I think because the civic life doesn't state anything about live streaming, as far as I can tell, I don't know if when we vote on this, are we agreeing to what live streaming means as, you know, what the internet says, or what we're meaning specific to here? And it sounds like there's a difference as to whether people can interact with the live stream or not. And maybe there's others too, which I think it's wise to maybe for all of us to get more informed before we have a chance to vote.
I agree.
Ron?
What exactly are we proposing to postpone?
We're proposing to postpone the decision about having all these meetings live streamed as on a regular basis. you want to read the motion, Janet? Do you have it?
Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, please repeat it.
Okay. SWNI, the motion is to have SWNI live stream all SWNI board meetings to the YouTube channel beginning November 2019 for all future board meetings.
So that's the board. And we have a motion to postpone, which we need to vote on first. Any other comments or observations on the motion to postpone? Okay, all in favor of postponing to a time certain, which would be the next board meeting in December, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 1, 2 opposed. All right, the motion to postpone carries, and we'll move on to the next issue that I'm reporting on. Yes. Oh, are there any abstentions?
Mary
Okay,
and Ron.
Mary and Ron want to abstain.
Does that mean somebody's going to be providing some definition as to what we're going to be doing?
I think that Sylvia
Yeah,
and I will
we
work
can
on
put
that,
that.
yeah, we'll work on coming up with some common definitions and try to get them out to you before the next meeting, so you have some idea of what it really means. Because it's not necessarily new technology, but it's new to us. All right, the next thing I wanna say, and I didn't get a chance to say this, for the purposes of the meeting, I'm going to call on people, give you 1 minute to speak on whatever it is you wanna speak on, and I'm not gonna call on people multiple times, and then allow everybody to speak once. If you have something burning that you think somebody else hasn't said, then I'll call you a second time, but that will be after I let everybody else have their comments. All right, on the executive report, it talks about 990s. I will tell you that Charlie offered to do our 990s and offered to do a quarterly review of our financials going forward. He's going to send us an engagement letter with a price as to what that would cost going forward. This is not the same thing as looking at monthly things right now. And we would have his knowledge of the organization to do those quarterly reviews and to do our 990s. If we turn it to somebody, if we hire somebody else, that's fine, but it just takes them longer to get up to speed. He hasn't sent the engagement letter in yet, so I'm sure we'll be looking at it in December, and then the board can decide what you would like to do. Sure.
So just based on financial policies, anything over 1,000, we always get 3 bids, so we need to have 3 bids.
All right, and then, that's all I have to say tonight. We'll go to our first vice president, who's going to review the financials for us. Excuse me, second vice president. This is going to be before the first vice president. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so what I am talking to you about is the West Portland Town Center Community Workshop. Sorry, is there a page? No. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. That took place on November 9th, and there were over 100 residents in attendance. There were affordable housing advocates and government agency representatives also there. We had a really nice lunch with a social hour that allowed people to use that time to provide comments on various different things that the people who are organizing the event, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, had posted. Ryan Kern and Joan Frederickson of the BPS had the opportunity to give us a welcome and orientation where they talked about what we've done for the past 7 months in terms of community engagement, which there's been 3 or 4 different opportunities for the different neighborhoods of Southwest Portland to get together for walking tours, for just orientation and various different purposes. And then they also gave us what their planned goals were for this Southwest Portland Town Center. Not easy to say all in one word. Then Commissioner Amanda Fritz got the opportunity to speak of the history of the West Portland Town Center, saying that it was dreamed up or encouraged by the different neighborhoods that were neighboring or joining that area of town, which is 4 or 5 of the different Southwest Portland neighborhoods. She encouraged this current planning project to further define this area with the goal of encouraging the diversity in the area and protecting it from gentrification that would force people to move out of the area, which I think there's quite a bit of possibility for that, given the history of what's happened in the different light rail systems that have gone through the other parts of the city. And so we broke into small groups of 8 or 10 of us each, and we were able to talk about the access to mass transit safety. And because the West Portland Town Center spans, I don't know if it's east or west or north and south, but it seems like everybody has a different opinion of what it is. I-5 and Barber there, which direction, it's kind of an angle is the problem. And if it spans both sides of those big intersecting roadways, that pedestrians and bikers are just not safe in that area right now. And in order to guarantee the success of the West Portland Town Center, it had to be guaranteed safety for everybody. And that another thing that I heard a lot was we needed a complete neighborhood, including all of the access to services and things that we need in an area that's close enough where you can walk and bike and perhaps take public transportation, but not always hop in your car to get to every time you needed to do anything. And then the last thing that we got to do is use little circles and put them on big maps and kind of define what zoning changes would be appropriate in the area to support the higher density and livability of the town center. So I guess in summary, what I would say is next time we have any opportunities like this, if you're interested in it, please attend them, because I think we can help really influence what takes place in our neighborhoods by doing this. And this is a big project that the city would like to kick off, and it's not dependent on only the light rail, but it will be integrated with the light rail if the light rail were to take place through that area.
Lynn?
I'd like to endorse your comment there. Actually just before this meeting, I attended a meeting where PBOT and other agencies gave a presentation on the proposed reconfiguration of the west end of the Ross Island Bridge, the bridgehead, together with making NATO a main street. And we had probably, I would say, at least 20 people. Certainly not enough, but I think it's very useful. Did the same thing, put little dots on the list. They had a huge map. It was very, very helpful. So anybody that has the opportunity, I think that's something you should participate in, and encourage your neighbors to as well.
Thank you, Lynn. Jackie?
And how was that, how was outreach provided for that? It's, the reason I'm asking is because I had heard about this one. I didn't hear anything about the one you're talking about, except yesterday speaking with Milt. He had mentioned, or Ed had mentioned, the one in the NATO. And so I just wondering if, was it TriMet, both were, no?
So this is the Bureau's
BPS?
BPS, yes. And
The
we had it in our
BPS
newspaper.
and PBOT.
So we've had,
The difference.
John, wait, Sylvia's got something she wants to say. She has the answer.
sorry. So I just want to say, it was in our paper on the front page for November, and also was in the page 3 in October's issue.
For
So-
the West Portland?
Yes.
Yes, that, okay, but not for the NATO?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
All right, John.
And the West Portland Town Center project there's a lot of funding coming, and there's a whole series of private nonprofit consultants that are working on outreach, so that the turnout is supported by that. So
You'll have to get
that's
the
the
same
difference
one.
between the BPS. This was just BPS doing it. It's
Right, yes, I mean, there was actually no, and again, this is based only on the potential for the 2020 bond. And there's
No touch.
absolutely nothing hard and fast at this point.
Okay, anybody else have a comment on this before I ask John? Did you want to comment again, John?
Well, I'll cover it.
Later.
And first Vice President's report is gonna have 2 parts instead of 1, because a couple things came up here. I just wanted
Wait,
to.
are you done? Okay, all right.
I
Then
thought
we'll
that
have the first Vice President's report and financial report.
Okay, first Vice President's report, first thing is Southwest Corridor. In case you haven't heard, a tentative decision was made on November 4th by the entire steering committee to abandon any examination of anything but light rail on Barber with two lanes going both directions. So it's 2-lane Barber, and I think it was the TriMet director. 2-lane Barber, 2 lanes on Barber both ways, and Bridgeport or bust is basically what they've decided. And that is because they came up with a whole bunch of money and saved a whole bunch more money. They'd started off at about $463 million over the desired budget, and they've now got it down to less than $93 million of over the desired budget. That includes a substantial increase in Metro's commitment. You know, $125 million more of the bond measure will go to light rail, the Southwest Corridor. The $65 million that the city of Portland and ODOT had been talking about related to the rebuilding of the Newberry structure, Newberry and Vermont structures will be put into the TriMet, the Southwest Corridor pot. And they have done a series of, they've changed the configuration, and they came to the conclusion that the traffic problems they create by going to single-lane Barber would be so extensive, there was just no way that they wanted to do that. So that will be voted on the meeting that's listed here on the 16th, and but the decision has basically been taken at this point.
The 16th of December?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it gonna be posted online so we can look at that? The revised, less expensive and more broad,
Well,
map. Sorry.
The cross-section will not change much from what they've shown in previous cross-sections of 2 lanes each way, and pedestrian improvements on both sides. It's a 128-foot cross-section, 2 lanes of traffic, 4 lanes of traffic, and pedestrian improvements on both sides. And that's been extant for a while. The areas where there are some savings.
She asked about whether it's gonna be posted online so she could look at it, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know if they're going to put that out anyplace.
If she wanted to get a
It's a
copy
couple,
of it,
it's
where
a,
would she get it?
Well, I'd go and.
they are just, you gotta ask them and get them to tell you
Yeah.
where they made the changes.
Okay,
It's-
all right.
Thank you.
and
Fran,
Is light rail going up the middle of Barber or I-5 or? do they-
It's, I'm sorry, it's definitely going the middle of Barber.
Okay, thank you.
all right, any other questions on this part of John's report? Okay, we'll move on to I've asked John to do the treasurer's report.
Right, the treasurer's report is, well, it's not the treasurer's report, it's a secondhand version of what I was able to glean.
It's on
Probably-
page 20, if you wanna look at it.
Yeah, there's a financial report there. I think that what you need to remember is that, the way that the accounting practices have been changed here is we are showing a lot more of our income earlier in the year, and towards the end of the year, we won't see as much available cash down in the last few months, except that I think if we raise some, by the end of March, we will have received all our civic life payments, correct?
Let's ask Sylvia, you wanna?
Okay, so this just goes back to the fact that Civic Life gives us an advance of And then we ask for our quarterly, what we spend, we invoice them, they reimburse us. In the last quarter, we'll pay back that advance. So there'll be less cash available under your operations. When you look at your balance sheet, what John is talking about is that operations account, that's the board funds. So right now, there's like 146,000 something in there. So there's a lot more available cash.
Than we normally would have. We spend about, if I remember correctly, we spend about $62,000
A quarter.
and about 20-something a month.
So, and the other
we've
thing
got
is that we got an
lots of
advance
money.
for our cleanup funding, and we've got money come in for the, Southwest 50th grant, so there's a lot coming in right now. It's a good-
Right, so it looks like we've got a lot more cash that it will go out. I think though Southwest 50th is pretty much paid off at this point.
But we're still working on it.
Okay.
Mhm.
And
So cash.
I guess
very
I'd,
expensive.
if people have questions, I'd try to answer them, but, I think this is pretty explanatory of the fact that we just see a lot of, Lynn?
The 146,000, I'm assuming, if you look into liabilities, you've got unearned income of 50,000. I'm assuming that takes down significantly the cash.
Right.
I would,
Other questions on the financial statements? I think if you read Charlie's one-page description of where the cash, where the expenses are, and any anomalies that we had in terms of things we paid more of or less of, he's very explanatory in his one-page description of what the October month was like. All right, let's move on to Sylvia's executive report.
So I also give you just a little budget update. So I talked about total income for the month, and which was $3,311.08. So contributions was like $2,300, and then our Bureau of Environmental Services fiscal fees came in at $415. Miscellaneous income was $329, and I just wanted to say that miscellaneous included some funds from Hillsdale Neighborhood Association in Collinsview, transferred some of their funds over to SWNI to help pay for the community policing event. And in fact, the Public Safety Committee raised like $450 to cover the expenses of that event. So in the end, Southwest Neighborhood only had like $188 from our food and entertainment, if you balance it all out. So they did a fabulous job about getting donated prizes and food, and Kiwanis helped cook the food, so it was a wonderful event. So, and then I wanted to say the fall cleanup. If you'll note there, Sarah put out a report today of 107 volunteers. That was incredible. So, you know, if there was no wait in the line, it's probably due to the fast work of the volunteers, and the numbers were very impressive again. We took in almost 5,200 at the gate. We had assisted 498 vehicles, including 3 bicycles. And we had 30 loads from seniors or disabled residents. Again, those are all volunteers going out to residents and helping them bring things to the cleanup. 70 bags of litter. We used 9 of our 11 drop boxes that were allowed for this year, and we had 8,600 pounds of scrap metal, 4,600 pounds of electronics, 2,200 pounds of batteries. That's a lot of batteries. Even corks weighed 102 pounds. I can't imagine. That's a lot. So I want to thank everybody for that event. Sarah works very hard, and she's put in a lot of effort into bringing more volunteers in, and we really appreciate everybody's cooperation there.
And it was a gorgeous day. It was a perfect day
Yes.
for doing it.
It was a little cold in the morning, but and I also said we had a volunteer to go pick up the pizza.
I wasn't gonna mention.
So that was
My husband went for me.
appreciated. And then I do want to highlight the great work going on at the Watershed Resource Center. So there was a volunteer planting this past week. weekend that Eric oversaw for Southwest 50th Drive. This is near Pendleton Creek. And they had 40 volunteers, and they managed to plant 450 plants in this site, which is just really exciting. And they did it all in 2 hours. So, and then finally, the small grant, we had a workshop in October. We'll have another one on Tuesday, December 3rd. If you have ideas for small grants, you can float them by John Tapero, myself, or go to these workshops and get some good ideas. And then finally, I'll just mention it now since Laura's not here. There's our Oregon Humanities conversation on December 2nd. So that's it.
Murphy, you have a question?
So, yeah, I have a small question about the pickup.
Yes.
The trash pickup thing, so we use 9 out of our 11 things. Which, how does that bode for spring since?
It doesn't. We will have to reimagine our spring event. So we won't do it tonight, but we'll have some people looking at different options for the board to consider. We could bring in paper shredding. We could do different kinds of things. So
that would be very good because it's.
I get requests all the time for paper shredding.
So I was just wondering because I understand, and perhaps incorrectly, that there are bureaus or departments or something that are trying to trim budgets for things like that. And since we use 9 out of 11, the rule of thumb generally is use it or you won't get it next time.
Right, that's why we did it in the fall.
Okay.
So, so we have to talk about what's gonna happen in the spring.
Okay, great, thank you.
Keep
me advised.
Other questions for Sylvia on her report? Would you comment on the impact of getting $5,100 at this event and what we need to do for the whole year?
So in our approved budget, we estimated that we would bring in $8,000 for the entire year under the spring cleanups. So we've already made $5,100 or $5,200 towards that goal.
Yeah.
So again, we're gonna have to look at spring, and because if we don't have bulky waste, that's a lot of trips coming in to pay for that, so we have to kind of think through that event.
We'll explain why.
But I think we're in very good shape.
Okay.
Really,
that's good.
5,000 was my goal, and we exceeded that.
And I will say your president had a terrific time collecting from everybody that came through and chatting with him. And I worked with a guy named Bob, who's apparently been doing this for a long time. And we had a system worked out that where we had people laughing in line while they were waiting to get through to where they were gonna drop things off. Because he would lean in the window and chat with them, and then that would slow the line down. So then I would take money from 2 more cars, and then I would say to them, here's what you do when you see that guy in the beanie hat down there. You lean out the window and say, Leslie said, I paid. So then he would wave 2 cars through, then he'd lean in and chat with the next one, and we'd get a couple more cars. So we kept it going really fast, but people had a good time. And they all said thank you. I don't know if there was a single car that didn't say thank you for doing this event. It's really meaningful. It's really helpful to me and my neighborhood. So I have a great time at that event, even if I've been standing in the pouring rain, and I wasn't that night. All right, let's move on to committee reports. We're gonna start with Mary Pat on the schools.
On page 28, you have a copy of the report. I just wanted to let everyone know that the information that Sharon sent out about the Google, I have uploaded almost everything for this particular year that, and that would be starting in July, that schools has done. So if people want access to that, based on what Catherine was asking for, that I am trying to make that happen. Our November committee meeting is tomorrow, so with an early board meeting, I don't have a full report of what has happened at our meeting. We will have Andrew Scott, who is the Portland Public Schools Southwest representative to the school board. He'll be with us, and we're going to ask him. Your sheet says we will ask about colon, and I didn't fill that in. We'll ask about the Student Success Act. We're going to ask about test scores, and we're going to ask more about Smith Elementary and his thoughts about what should happen with that. And then also give him an opportunity, since he's been in the job for about 4 months. I think he started July 1 after being elected back in May. What he thinks about going forward and his vision for what's happening with Portland Public Schools. We were supposed to have a couple of other people from Portland Public Schools at our meeting, Patrick LaBeouf and Dana White, who are specifically working on Smith Elementary and what's going to happen there. It sounds like that they didn't get the city of Portland to approve yet the demo permit for the annex at Smith, and so they're still working on that, but there's hope that that'll be done by the end of this year, going into January. That should be, should already be down, and I have information that Patrick will call and let us know what's going on. Also because I reported in various different places that we were probably gonna have a 2020 school bond. It looks like Portland Public Schools may defer that until 2021. And I think part of the reason you're not hearing more about Smith is if that's gonna get deferred, then it changes timelines on everything. There's no school for Portland Public Schools next week. It's winter break is on the horizon, our Southwest News December article explains a few things that people may want to do as students, but also talks about a book called How to Raise Successful People. I am recommending it, and on your sheet you should have information with a link, and if it doesn't, because I had several versions of this, let me know and I'll get you the YouTube link for this author who talks a lot about just a mnemonic of how we can raise successful people. So when you talk about education, what all has to go into that? And it's a way for us to be able to have a bigger framework when we have information about equity, when we have information about different topics at the schools meetings. Let's see, Beth Madison, Robert Gray Middle School principal for many years, 9 years I think, is going to be moving on to the district office really quickly. She was going to be finishing at Robert Gray at the end of the school year, but she's actually going to be moving to the district office. Her replacement has been secured, but I don't know, it might have happened today, I don't know the name of who's going to be the new principal. We had hoped to celebrate with Beth before she left, because she has been very, very helpful with things we've done at Stevens Creek Crossing and various places through the years. But this happened quickly, so tomorrow night our committee will put together a little card, send it off to her, and hope that we get a chance to see her at some point in the future. Two other announcements. The same night, unfortunately, as the Oregon Humanities conversation on December 2nd, that's going to be called Exploring Power, that's going to be part of SWNI. There's also a Southwest Action Group meeting that's going to be about hate at school. That'll be over at Riversgate. So it's just something that people may want to know about and tell people about one or the other. And then affinity groups are meeting at Robert Gray. So there's the PTA, but there's also different groups that may be BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, or it might be the Jewish community group, and these groups are all meeting separate from the PTA, and in January, it's my understanding that probably that PTA meeting will bring all those groups together to have a further conversation about social justice, race, equity, inclusion, and this was originally, I think, prompted by the issues of racism and gun violence over at Robert Gray earlier this year. So that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mary Pat? Bruce?
Now, this meeting that you're talking about, Robert Gray, will that information about that be in the SWNI News?
The PTA meeting?
Well, yeah, this one that you talked about at Robert Gray, it's in January.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be in SWNI News, but it might be in some report that I put out. It's the regular PTA meeting, so if we look up when the regular PTA meeting is at Robert Gray, it probably will be that night. And I don't know if that's I know they're meeting, they meet tonight, so that's probably the third Wednesday.
And you write a report in the paper, so.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mary Pat? All right. Parks and Community Centers. Now, Steve isn't here. Is anybody here on behalf of Steve? I did talk to him.
Well, not me, but I have something to add.
Okay, about parks?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you speak first, then I'll speak.
Okay. I went to a meeting down in South Portland for the River Plan, South Reach, and want to invite you all to the Collinsview meeting on December 4th. BPS is going to come and do the same setup, a big open house with 7 or 8 tables. They'll bring their staff to come and talk to us. And then also in one of this is at Riverdale High School. And then in one of the classrooms, they're going to come and talk about, the-
Environmental remapping.
Thank you, that's it. So anyway, we're gonna start our meeting, they're going to set up and be going from 6:30 to 8:30 on December 4th. Everybody's welcome to come.
When?
December 4th, Wednesday.
Yeah, at the Riverdale High School.
Yes.
All of this will be there. Janet?
Just an update, in our neighborhood, Hayhurst neighborhood, we have Pendleton Park. It was hit twice in the last 3 weeks, with vandalism. On about November 7th, 14 to 15 youth were observed spray painting the bathroom structures inside and out. The graffiti included, ugly images and other things, and right adjacent to the playground area. So park staff, a number of folks reported the graffiti to the graffiti line. When I got a count from park staff on how many hours had been put in, so far they've been up to about 10 hours of 2 staff working on the cleanup, and they weren't still finished. So just a huge budget hit. And so we're gonna try to do some things through next door to notify parents. If your middle schoolers are out at 8:30 at night in the neighborhood, probably need to check on them. Because that was about the age group that was observed. The following week, last Friday night, a group of young adults who had 2 cars came and dumped garbage in the park, and apparently they were filming what's called a rage event, something, they were doing. So they had cameras, they were filming, dumped garbage, computer monitors, broken glass, all kinds of things in the park, and then left it. Even when confronted by a neighbor saying, hey, what's going on, off they went. So again, and neighbors came and cleaned it up the next day, so park staff didn't. But so we hope to have some folks out in the park this Friday night, because again, there's another long school break that may be an incentive to be in the park again. And I'm not sure if adjacent parks are experiencing anything similar.
Thank you, Janet. And even though Steve isn't here, and I wouldn't presume to make his report for him, we did talk about the fact that on the 26th, I think is Tuesday, Adina, who's the head of the Parks Bureau, is going to meet with City Council, I think at 9:30, and explain what proposals they have for keeping the parks going and keeping them up and improving them. We're gonna get to hear their plan, because as you know, last summer there was 2 days of hearings, and people were all up in arms about the community centers being closed and people being laid off. Now I think they've had enough time to try to figure out what possible things they can do to steady the system and to support our parks. And that'll be next Monday at 9:30. You can watch it on YouTube on the City Council channel, which is channel 30 on television, but I don't know if there's channel 30 on YouTube. But you can watch it at home, just turn it on, or at work, and you can listen to the comments that they have. And then we'll have a better sense of what the city's thinking they'll do. Then they're gonna ask for public testimony after they explain what their proposal is. Okay, we'll move on to transportation, and we have a motion on page 29, and Dave is gonna talk about that.
And apologies for the short notice, but we just had our meeting on Monday, and that's when I became aware of this. This is a motion that came out of Swirl. It's specific to an appeal that they're making to City Council. They're before City Council in October, and they're coming back early December, and they wanted a letter of support regarding their motion. The motion is to send a letter to the City Council expressing concern over loosening of required frontage improvements for proposed townhouse development on Southwest Broadway Drive, and to support a Swirl's appeal of the hearing officer's decision. It's 740 feet of frontage, so it's very substantial on Lower Broadway Drive. Mainly supports renters. Do you have any questions?
I have a question. It supports the appeal that, what was the hearings officer decision? They are going to appeal that decision.
David, do you want to answer, or do you want John to answer that?
I'll let John, if he has more insight into that specific point.
Just following the discussion, the hearings officer's decision was not to require the frontage improvement, but to require alternative gravel improvements on the other side of outside.
This is the hillside we're talking about.
Right, there's a guardrail there. They're gonna put down some
Right.
additional gravel between the pavement and the guardrail as
That'll be safe.
pedestrian
That'll be real safe.
improvement.
But why this is really important to Transportation Committee is PDOT in April of 2018 told us we're no longer gonna require developers to put in sidewalks in Southwest Portland only on collector streets. We're just gonna require them to put in extended shoulders. Then on this specific development, they're not even gonna do that. And so it's a further lowering of the standards.
That's very helpful, because I'm gonna write this letter, and I'd like to know the substance of what it
We
is
have a
they're trying to
simple
do.
lettering supply, you would.
Okay. Questions on this? Do you understand where it is? It's on Broadway, and the developer's coming in and is not making the improvements that have been required by the city in the past. And the city is approving them dropping those requirements and doing something much
The
less.
appeals officer did, but city council hasn't made a decision yet.
Right. Good. Catherine?
So this is not just renters only, I think it's also townhomes and.
Yes, I'm just speaking
And
of the
it's very high-end,
population.
like $1 million units in the development. And then the renters are the rest of the people that live in that area.
That on
that
Broadway Drive
walk up
currently,
and
that
down the
would be
street,
able to
or
use.
don't walk up and down the street because it's too dangerous. And also, there's no busing in that area to support any other form of transportation, so everybody has to hop in their car, if they have a car.
And it's very close to Portland State. I mean, you should be able to walk. It's right at the bottom of Broadway Drive.
Other questions for, David? All right. Do I have a motion, or I have a motion, we don't need a second because it's from a committee, so any further discussion before we put the vote? All right. All in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, no abstentions. The motion's been passed. That leads us to the Public Safety Committee, and Sylvia's gonna do the public, excuse me.
Can I ask
I'm
you
sorry.
a question? What's happening on the way to PCC? With all the
All
white
the lines.
candles and lines and all that, is that permanent?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
What's the question? I didn't hear the question.
Oh, the road, what is that, 49?
49,
Capital
Highway,
Highway,
49.
it's PCC, and then it's curb after
After the PCC.
So that's the new policy, is
correct.
So the funny thing is, if I might just tell you
Okay,
a funny
Jackie.
story, I'm teaching my 15-year-old grandson how to drive. And we go up to the PCC parking lot, and so he's now graduated to coming off out at that parking lot and up on 49 for Capital Highway. And I didn't know how to explain. You know, I'm his teacher, I'm trying to tell him what these lines mean.
One
And-
lane each way.
And it's just great, I still don't know.
Gary?
Yeah, just for the record, PBOT came to West Portland Park and presented the whole project, and there were a few questions, but at the end, kind of a straw poll, you know, we didn't.
Nobody objected to that?
We didn't, no, we didn't render an objection.
Murphy, did you want to?
Oh, no, that's, I was just gonna say, the reiteration, that's
Okay. John?
I just make the comment that, and I wasn't here for this, but there probably should be no objections, because in a different format, there was a plan done a number of years ago in the late 90s that envisioned narrowing that street down to 2 lanes. I mean, it was gonna be a lot greener and done with plantings and other things instead of paint, but there was a plan in place, at least as far as I think Pomona. They kind of extended it on beyond there, but at least to Pomona, there had been a plan to narrow 49th down to 1 lane each way then, so.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to public safety, and Sylvia's gonna report for Kim, who's traveling right now.
So the committee debriefed its community policing event, and then also we had a follow-up to our discussion with the presentation from Civic Life with the community policing staff now, there's a big difference. They're not doing neighborhood watch anymore, it's called Neighbors Together. There's very much less emphasis on working with police. And so a lot of people are very concerned, there's no more, like if you have a problem home, where there's drugs and activity, and you used to call the crime prevention or community safety person, and they would bring into the different bureaus. It might be Bureau of Development Services if there was litter and other problems or noise or whatever. There's no one now to kind of bring in all the different partners. And so we have some concern about that. Their response is you just need to call the police. And of course we know that there's not a lot of officers available for this type of work. So we reviewed kind of what the neighborhood response team officers are doing, but there's only 2 of those. So it might be that we might be making some recommendations, but we don't have anything at this point.
Thank you.
And we did, if you're marking up your new calendars for 2020, the Neighborhood Emergency Fair is scheduled for Sunday, March 8th.
Any questions for Sylvia on the Public Safety Committee? Okay.
I just have a suggestion. Could you ask, when you prepare your suggestions, could you put on the list to provide the educational piece? Because that's what we relied on the most, was to have.
Educational piece.
Well, when an officer would come to your neighborhood association to educate you about their side of, who does what, and.
Yes.
So that's just little.
So there's less and less contact with the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions about public safety? All right, we'll move on to land use. Gary.
Okay,
Page 30 in your material.
our meeting was just last night. So the ink's dry and the memory is refreshed. So, yeah, I reported out to to members here of the board last month that I didn't think we would have anything to bring forward until perhaps January. I noted that Morgan Tracy was coming to our meeting last night, and we were going to get a solid review on the residential infill project, and with a healthy time allotted for question and answers. So they started out with their slide deck, about a 45 set slide deck, and after a while it became clear that in their slide they have an unusable map. It's just, it tries to take the whole city and show you where the new zones are going to be for the residential infill project, which is higher density, multi-dwelling units in traditional, single-family residential neighborhoods. So I said, look, pull up the map app and let's start looking at it. And I did that on purpose, John. I studied that map app, and I've made it clear, my thinking clear as the chair of the committee, that they've done a generous job across SWNI putting Z overlay in, which is cross-hatching, that says we're already saying these areas are out of bounds for the high-density development proposition embedded in the residential infill plan. And John, threw a few questions out there, and they said, yeah, the highest priority was the preservation of the natural resources, of, in this case, the entire Southwest Hills neighborhoods. And John had some banter with them, about whether that was the #1 priority they should be looking at. But right behind it was landfill, landslide zones. The young lady on the staff indicated that 25% slope, they model automatically kind of predicts landslides, whether or not it's a known recent landslide type place. So anyhow, we got through that, and it really came down to, though, was these streets. You can't tell whether or not, if you're a neighborhood rep, land use person going back to your neighborhood, you can't walk down the street to one of our famous gravel, potted, non-existent streets and declare that the city of Portland hasn't accepted that or annexed it. And so it got pretty heated, and at the end, you know, Morgan he's offering to get us something, either a map or a file that we can, you know, use throughout our SWNI neighborhood associations and be able to tell people, no, that land that street hasn't been accepted by the city, and therefore it'll fit the rules of RIP, which say you can't go in there and develop. You can't go in and put the multi-unit housing in there. So then we got on to the rest of the slide deck, dealing with displacement and affordability. And you know, basically at the end of the discussion about displacement, they said, look, we're running a model, and a model with a lot of assumptions. And John, along with others, we're kind of digging that out of them, that there's a lot of assumptions in the models. That aside, in closing, and this is embedded right on their talking points, the project team regarding displacement is that more intervention beyond just the blunt tool of zoning is going to be needed to prevent the displacement, which again, their modeling showed it to be mild, modest, but again, their model is loaded with assumptions. So, all right, then on to the affordability. That didn't go anywhere, and in the end, the project manager sitting alongside of me said that increased affordability is not a key deliverable or language that they even want in these project documents anymore. I'm talking about increased affordability. Affordability is in the eyes of the income of the beholder. All right. And I thought putting up a $380,000 price tag for a couple of townhomes, like John Rose townhomes that they were showing, I think, that's pretty pricey for.
It's not affordable.
Yeah, it's yeah.
It was shown as $380,000 townhomes, opposed to one very large $1.1 million single-family home.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
comparative.
Well,
yeah.
Same lot, under the new system, they think
Yeah.
that's the change.
Yeah, but sitting alongside of it was their picture of a classic, natural, affordable, old cottage that could sell at $480,000.
Yeah.
So they were saying $480,000 down to $380,000, but we went back and looked at the MFI numbers, and you know, it just doesn't. It isn't eye-popping increased affordability. Last, I'm sorry for being long-winded here, but last but not least then was the, you know, what's the hurry, the timing of the RIP implementation, and the just newly created anti-displacement action plan. That is just getting underway. We don't know a lot about when they're going to start delivering comprehensive code language. Right now, it's just a goal. It's, you know, it's just has an aspirational setup. But HB 2001, you know, the multi-family housing, allowing it to be legally placed in single-family residential neighborhoods, there's a lot of work there yet. These committees have to work, and John helped me out here with they have to come through and be in agreement with the state land use board. They have to have.
They've got to write the rules within the next year. So it's not the board, it's the LCDC commission.
Yeah, and there's an advisory board of citizens that get to monitor and look over that, and we have an alternate to that in our SWNI Neighborhood Land Use Committee. So that's where we ended with the discussion on what's the rush, because you could just see they wanna get this thing going.
Can I ask a question? Just an observation. House Bill 2001 has to go through these development of administrative rules before it can actually be implemented in the different cities that are subject to the state legislation. That legislation sort of overlays the residential infill project. Did Tracy have any comments about whether they wanted to wait until that legislation was fleshed out in terms of administrative rules before they tried to implement the residential infill project? Because they're working on top and as opposed to each other.
He didn't profess to know what was gonna happen during those activities that are forthcoming. In their website, they claim that they're pretty damn certain that whatever they roll out with a RIP is gonna be underneath whatever these.
Will be consistent with House Bill 2001.
Yeah, but he kinda shook his head at the same time. So that was, so we dismissed them, and then we held a, kind of a follow-up, kind of what all just transpired here. And a motion was put forward, and it was unanimous that we really should request, that RIP project management align their final request for city hall or city council approval, that not come before. Now here we're using the word completion of these legislative activities that have, rules that have to be written. We could debate that a little more amongst our team, but maybe we'll just come out hard before the completion, that you don't bring it into City Hall before the ink is dried on the rules.
Right, because they're working at the same time, but we're all gonna be subject to the rules that are developed by LCDC, which will affect the residential info project, but they're having hearings. The first hearing on the residential info project is January 15th, right?
Yeah, January 15th is the first hearing on RIP, and testimony, you can start on December 15th submitting testimony. Well, you got December 11th before City Hall. They have a little working. They're gonna get updated, kinda get brought up to speed on the draft, but they're not doing any voting or anything. It's a workshop. So I did grouse at him about this is a classic, over the holidays, that like if the only public testimony has to be submitted by the 15th during the hearings, you're asking for all of the coalitions across the city to work all this up during the holidays. And many of the land use members, again, I put this down here because they're very confident that this is going to be a recycle. If you look at Better Housing by Design, John, being slightly less contentious than RIP, so I could get saved by recycle at City Hall. We debated whether or not to just have them delay the meeting, but Tracy Morgan, Tracy said, they had the city council set this date, and they said we want to start now on the 15th.
All right.
So we're not gonna, based on that kind of firm feedback, we're not gonna fight that, but we think that we should be bringing to the December board a motion about that you do not ask for city council's final approval on RIP until such time that these rules are well-known. They might still be in committee, but the ink's drying on them, and I'm counting on people like John to help me on the.
All right, John?
Just a couple of things. I think that especially if you're in one of the neighborhoods, when we talk about the Z zone and protecting natural resources, you have to understand that that was something done as part of the comprehensive plan, and there's sort of absurd things happening because there was things were inventoried as real low value natural resources, yet those low value natural resources were a criteria for putting the Z zone in, and it may be worse in Markham than most places, but literally in my subdivision, which is a homeowners association, we have houses on 12-foot streets, paved, but privately maintained. And on one side of the street, we have 3 or 4 houses that will be subject to RIP, and on the other side of the street, houses that are not. We have pockets in the middle of our subdivision where there are 4 or 5 houses that are completely surrounded by Z zones, but they themselves are going to be RIP properties. So that's a big problem. And the other thing I would speak to is what Gary was mentioning about HB 2001, which I've started saying a living space odyssey kind of thing. It will mandate, even in the Z zones, that duplexes be included, and it will mandate ADUs on, and the one place in Markham that we're seeing the most development is on the 10,000 square foot lots, which are outside of RIP, but that's where we're seeing the small houses getting built. So where we have a 30,000 square foot lot that was zoned 10,000 square feet, we're now seeing 3 houses that have been built in the past with flags, and in one case we've got 2 additional ADUs. So on 30,000 square feet, we're up to 5.
This is a good example for you all to be thinking about, and we're gonna come back to this land use issue in December at our December meeting with some additional information. I'm gonna have to.
You have a question.
Yes, sorry.
I just have a quick question, Gary. A member came up at our last meeting and said, we understand that the land use committee.
Could you speak up, please?
We understand that the land use committee is going to bring a motion in January about the residential infill project, and from what you're saying, that is not currently the case. But I'm saying, if there is one in January, if you could let us know, because we've got a member who's really interested in it, like as soon as you have an idea of what the motion might be, like even before our December meeting.
That's exactly what our game plan is here. It's in the
It'll be in
notes.
December.
Yeah,
It's
we
gonna
have to
be
do
in
the motion
December.
in December because the hearings are in January, so it.
So that's the
January's
only
too late.
motion you'll be bringing forward is in December?
Yes.
No motion in January?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, we'll move on to Murphy Terrell, watershed.
Wow. Okay, so, we've had a pretty, interesting few speakers that have come in and talked to us about, watershed in general, and the Pacific Northwest and watershed in general, but not specific, which is really good, but not specifically to the SWNI watershed area, so I'm not gonna get into that too much. But something interesting, if you'll pardon me for stepping on transportation, Southwest Capitol Highway, the section between the viaduct and Taylor's Ferry, has proposed changes. They've got a 95% plan ready, and they're going to have we have a subcommittee talking with PDOT on December 4th, and it'll be in room 7, and PDOT will have an open house January 30th. It'll be at late afternoon and evening hours, but they don't know what the hours are yet. But the point is, so far as watershed is concerned, that they're changing the design and the volume of the stormwater facilities, particularly number 4, which is the one that's gonna go along Multnomah Boulevard. So I'm interested to hear what it is that they have to say about that, because it's not up on their website yet. So I'm sure the current plan for that facility is larger than what they expect to need for, Southwest Capitol Highway. So they are planning for the future for having greater needs. So they're digging a bigger hole, sorry, than what they need today because they're planning for tomorrow, but we'll see what the change in the plan is. So that's of interest to us, in addition of which with a tie-in with land use is that there's a proposed development in the beginning of the works off of Canby, which is the south border of Gabriel Park, and this would be a development between Gabriel Park and Multnomah Boulevard, and they will also be putting their stormwater into the system at that point. So that's like, it's not a done deal, but it's our bright idea is this, and so it's still under concept, shall we say. Our regular meeting is the third Thursday of the month, December 19th, if anybody has any questions. And I would like to underscore Collins View's Southwest Outreach project that BPS is having at Riverview High School, December 4th at 6:30. It's about BPS's bright ideas for what to do with the South Reach and waterfront, and anybody who wants to have access, kayaking, have whatever kind of access to that section of the river would very well be advised to come and have a listen. So I emphasize that. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you very much. Sylvia has something from Equity and Inclusion. Go ahead.
So Laura wasn't able to be here tonight. She's a caregiver for a close friend who's in crisis. So she asked me just to say there will be an Equity and Inclusion meeting next Monday, and then she also attended a city council session where they had a proclamation signing as Native American Heritage Month in November, and Laura was there. And they spoke about, I think it was Commissioner Fritz recognized Laura for her work in the neighborhood associations, specifically as the Equity Inclusion Chair. And they had a strong emphasis on Native American locally and the needs of the people. So it was a very good event. She asked that I pass this around so people can see.
Yes. Congratulations to Laura and her group that she's been working with. All right, our next, we're a little bit behind, but not too much. We're on unfinished business, and I confess there's some unfinished business that I forgot. Very important business. One of the things that we testified to last week when we went down to testify on the code revision and the new proposed resolution from Commissioner Udales, we testified before the City Council and asked them to support our grant contract to go from a one-year contract, which is what we heard in September, to a 5-year contract, consistent with what all your wishes were.
Mm-hmm.
In conjunction with that, I signed and worked with a letter, as did Sylvia, with all 5 other coalitions, and we all signed a letter saying we were very interested in supporting the city in their equity and inclusion measures, but we didn't think that we could do that work in 1 year, and we really wanted a 5-year contract. What you should know is that in Daly's current version of the new resolution, they've agreed to a 3-year contract. So we went from a 1-year contract, I think in September, to the city council saying, no, that's not enough, to a 3-year contract. But as I was testifying on the 5-year contract, I saw Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Fish, Commissioner Hardesty all write down the 5-year. And they now have a letter from the 5 coalitions saying we'd rather it be 5 years instead of 3 years, because the process for the new resolution, if it actually occurs, will end about 3 years from now when they have their implementation of their new ideas. And if we don't have funding there, then we wouldn't be able to implement the new code revision. So we asked them for a longer period.
So I have a small question. You said there are 5 coalitions that signed this letter, but there are 7 coalitions.
There are.
Go into that?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
I'm gonna let Sylvia speak to this because there are 7.
So there are 7 district areas. Live nonprofit actually have the 5-year grant agreement that's gonna be up in June of 2020. So there are 2 other offices that were on that timeline that I put in the board packet. So on the Civic Lives action plan for this year was to move those city offices into the nonprofit mold. So they would have to form their own 501c3. That takes a lot of effort. So, and that's a big thing. I don't even know if they have the community to support that. But that's the direction that Civic Life wants to take, is that they feel like by having the nonprofits, you leverage the funding that is given to them. So they want to shift that mold. So what we did in the letter is to say the 5 nonprofit coalitions support this. We also support the funding for the 2 other offices, and we cited that the diversity and civic leadership organizations should also continue their funding.
May I ask, I don't mean to like tattletale or something, but what are the 2 that are the not nonprofit?
So there's the North office in Kenton, and then there's the East office.
Okay.
And both of them just lost their executive directors.
Yeah, I'm not moving.
All right,
That letter's in here, it's
Yes,
on the
it
back
is.
of the,
Thank you. Yeah, that's the timeline.
And
The
then
bottom line there is actually talks about the nonprofit model, and I honestly don't know what all those implications are, but I do know in Civic Life Action Plan, they singled out those 2 city offices becoming nonprofit.
When you find this, it's got the, my letter, the letter from the coalition, plus this is a timeline for Commissioner Daly's new proposed resolution. And the thing that you wouldn't necessarily pick up right away in looking at this is that they're suggesting that after they get through this year of a multi-year work group, that they're then going to examine the neighborhood coalition model. And we have no idea what that means. So we're keeping it to the side on how that develops.
Shift to it and then examine.
Okay, is there any other unfinished business that we need to raise? All right, we'll go to new business. We're considering hosting a spring SWNI candidate forum. My recollection, I think I just learned this the other day, that the League of Women Voters is having their promoting forum on, I think it's April 28th. So that leaves plenty of time for us to do something, say in February or March. And then I think there are going to be a number of coffees in the Southwest neighborhood for different candidates. I know that Mingus Mapes is coming over here for a coffee sometime in January. I know some of the other candidates are too. I sat next to one of the candidates at the hearing last week, so you might want to start paying attention to the folks that are running for city council and that are running for both Amanda's position and Commissioner Udall's position. Len?
I've actually gotten contact from Matt Mapes, and he wants to have a conversation, I don't know.
Right. Well, I think that he has wonderful credentials. He worked in the Office of Civic Life. He's well educated. We aren't supposed to take any position on any individual candidate, but I would think that it would be pretty easy to get into one of those coffees and some of the coffees for the other folks that are running. And maybe what we can do is put a list on the paper of things that we know about, so that all of you can take advantage of that.
Well, I do want to, I need direction. So if we're gonna do a candidates forum, we need at least 5 people to be on a planning committee to work with Sarah as an event, since she's our event person. And I need to know, because the rates in the Multnomah Art Center are gonna go up in January, so I wanna be able to rent the auditorium and facilities if we're going to do this. So I need to give you some thought. We don't have to do it tonight, but just think about it. Do we wanna host our own event? I don't know if the League of Women Voters is in the evening or if it's during the daytime.
They're doing 2, April the 8th and like the 28th. There's 2 different ones, and I don't know if they're doing them in different parts of town.
And the times. So sometimes
I don't know.
That's a little harder. So if we wanna host our own event, we need to get going on it. I think the deadline to file is something like March 8th.
March 3rd.
March. March is a scary month because we are doing our emergency fair and there's a spring break. So I would think early April, but we need to also get on calendars and we as a nonprofit, invite all candidates running for a certain race. We have an outside facilitator. We ask everybody the same questions. We give them the same time. So, just think about it if you wanna do that. It's a lot of work, but, you know, it is something that affects us.
And your president's gonna volunteer to be part of that committee, because I think it's so important, if we can do it. I mean, if we can actually do it, it doesn't cost us more money than the auditorium. I think it's a great idea. So if any of you have an interest in it, please let me know.
Don't look at me.
Well, you're smiling, so that's not.
Don't look at me like that.
All right, one last thing, I want all of you to think about, something I'd like to propose to you, which is, I've learned in the last year or two to, rely upon Sam Pearson in interpreting our SWNI bylaws and also the ONI standards. So if a situation comes up, I can call Sam and say, okay, here's what I'm saying that the rules say, are you aware of it? Do you have any suggestions? And he's been impartial, completely open, and been very helpful. So what I'd like the board to think about is maybe we ask him to be an ex officio member of this board to be our rules expert, because he spent 4 years as president, and he does know our rules really well, and if you need a quick answer, he's good at giving it. It would also take, it would give you, each of you with your neighborhood associations, a resource to ask questions about when you get to a question about your own bylaws and rules, because Sam can help you with that if you're interested. So just think about that, and I'll bring it back up again in December. Any other unfinished business tonight or new business? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Move
Okay.
to adjourn.
Okay, we have
Second.
John and we have Murphy.